Council. You may. Thank you. You may take your seats. At this point, I want to invite you to sit. Kindly take your seats. Next is our Dean, School of Arts and Humanities, through whom this school is hosting this Holocaust, through Daystar University, to come and welcome our guests, and also after that, welcome the rest of the people to continue with this. Our Dean, kindly.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity to invite the Daystar community and our friends at Daystar, members of the teaching community, the faculty, and members of the management, and friends who have come here to commemorate together with us. We are deeply honored as a school to host this event here at Daystar, and so we want to give you a warm welcome to Daystar, and in particular to the School of Arts and Humanities. In the School of Arts and Humanities, we have various programs that are represented, and the specific program that has invited you here is on peace and international studies. We have an MA in diplomacy, development, and international security, and we have a BA in international relations and security studies, and a diploma in international relations. And the students who are here with us are members of that school, and a few of representatives from other schools who have come to interact with the guests who have come here today. And so we want to give you a mighty, hearty welcome, and to tell you to feel at home and feel together with us for the period we shall be here. Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you, Dean. At this point, we want to get to the speeches, and we will start with the representative from the UN. I think they had sent something for us.
essential work. The map powerful reminder of what can happen when we stop seeing our common humanity. On this day of Holocaust remembrance, the UN urges everyone to denounce political and religious ideologies that set people against people. Let us all speak out against anti-Semitism and attacks against religious, ethnic, and other groups. Let us create a world where dignity is respected, diversity is celebrated, and peace is permanent. I thank you.
Thank you, UN representative, Mr. Kehema, for your speech. Next, we have the representative from the Republic of Germany, Mr. Jonas Kohl, kindly.
Dear Ambassador Joseph, dear Director Watene, representative of the PS, dear Professor Ayiro, dear Dean Musembi, then also dear Mr. Kahima from the UN, Excellencies, faculty, ladies and gentlemen, dear students. Today it is in memory of the victims of the Holocaust that we are here at Daystar University in Nairobi. And I stand here as representative of the country in which the industrial-scale murder of millions of Jews in Europe was planned, prepared, and executed. Sorry. Ambassador, I owe you a debt of gratitude. Excuse me. I owe you a debt of gratitude since you are willing to remember this day in the past with me here. I'm really sorry. It is a sign of friendship between Germany and Israel that we can do this here today in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to be able to stand here today at the university, an institution of higher learning and humanity, and to speak to you about why the Shoah is something that we need to remember together today and also in future. And as you can see, it's something that affects me personally as well. With each passing year, fewer and fewer eyewitnesses still live to tell the tale of persecution, of survival of these Nazi death camps. With each passing year, the liberation of Auschwitz is further in the past. And time has power over our memory. Time can erode, can even erase memory. We have the responsibility to resist this by remembering the victims of National Socialism, the victims of the Holocaust. The Holocaust is part of German history and identity. And this is a democratic consensus in my home country that was built very slowly. It took decades, and it was marked by resistances and also setbacks. And addressing the historical guilt of the Holocaust and trying to draw the right lessons in order to avoid history from repeating itself is now also part what defines modern Germany. In order to try to understand the crimes committed by my grandparents' generation, one must also retrace the long path that led to the gates of Auschwitz, this most infamous of all death and extermination camps. You might have seen a picture of these railway lines that lead up to this gate, and which ended at the ramp from which over 1 million Jews were sent to be murdered. Over 1 million in Auschwitz alone, out of the 6 million in all the death camps combined. And if you want to understand this past, you must recall the roots of National Socialist ideology. The racial ideology, the anti-Semitism, the hatred against Jews and other races. The brutal political language that was used to diminish political opponents during the Weimar Republic, which was this brief and very troubled period of democracy in Germany that preceded the National Socialist dictatorship. Reason and measured political rhetoric disappeared towards the end. Violence became a means of doing politics, as the contempt for parliament and politicians, and above all the rule of law and democracy, were increasingly lost day by day. Primo Levi, a Jewish Italian chemist who survived the Auschwitz death camp to become an author, famously said, "It happened, therefore it can happen again." And this sentence is not theoretical or historical. It's not a formula for remembrance ceremonies like this one here today. I think this sentence is a test in the here and now, and not just in Germany or Europe. We should never forget what happened, and we should never ignore the possibility that it can also happen again. Ladies and gentlemen, the Holocaust did not start with the construction of death and concentration camps such as Auschwitz. It did not start with a concrete planning for the extermination of a whole people or ethnicity. It started with racial hatred and anti-Semitism permeating a society, and the search for scapegoats and enemies to supposedly explain felt injustices and distract from one's own responsibility. Violent rhetoric led to violence in the streets, and the road to the Holocaust started with many not caring about what happened to their neighbors, not speaking up, not standing up for each other. It led through many jokes and hurtful comments about the supposedly others, the Jews. I think many contributed willingly in this. And now, dear students, as tomorrow's generation, I think young people, not only here, not only in Germany or back in Europe, but I think everywhere around the globe, and also here in Kenya, have the responsibility to learn from this past. And it's not because your grandparents were individually or collectively responsible for the gravest crimes against humanity ever committed. That is a very sad privilege of my own country. But I think it's important because it is so easy to judge other people, to make a joke about somebody's sexual orientation or somebody's different faith, to look down on someone because he or she is following a different political party, or maybe here in the Kenyan context is from a different region or a different ethnic group or community. And I think with social media, with Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, and so on, it has become easy and even fun to share comments, to share a funny meme, and thereby hurting and demeaning somebody else. And I think, this is how hate speech begins. It's often with a sarcastic comment somewhere on the internet. But these words and comments are action and can lead to very real crimes, very real violence. And again, it happened, therefore it can happen again, but also it does not have to. And I think we should remember this year's and all future international Holocaust Remembrance Days as a reminder to this, that it should not happen again. Thank you for your attention, and please excuse me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Johannes, representative from the Republic of Germany, for that very emotional speech that you have delivered this morning. Next, we move to the next part of the program, where we want to invite the Dean, School of Arts and Humanities, to welcome our VC, to welcome our guests to Daystar this morning. Kindly, our Dean.
Thank you for what is happening in this meeting. And since this is an academic program, and it's in the School of Arts and Humanities, I would love to invite the DVC Academic Research and Student Affairs to come and invite our VC, who will invite the representative from the Ministry of Education and the government of Kenya, and thereafter, we will humbly request again the VC to come and invite his guest, the ambassador of the State of Israel. The VC will make his speech. Thank you, Madam DVC, kindly come.
Good morning, everyone. Indeed, this is an academic function, an educational function, one that touches our minds and our hearts as we are reminded, as has been ably spoken about, of what happens. An interpretation of Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 9. That's what I thought about this morning. The heart of human mind, the heart and the human mind are wicked. Who can understand? And this is the memory of what can happen and should never happen. So we want to welcome everybody to think deeply and to reflect on this memorial and what it means for us today and what it will mean in the future, particularly for the younger generation who are on Facebook and other platforms that can express hate that would lead to violence. It's my privilege now to welcome our Vice Chancellor, the CEO of the university, Professor Laban Ayiro, to make a few remarks and welcome our guests. Welcome, Vice Chancellor.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Israel, Ordered Joseph, Mr. Jonas Kohl, the Political Counselor, Republic of Germany, Mr. David Watene from our own Ministry of Education of the Republic of Kenya, representing Ambassador P.S. Simon Nabukwesi, Mr. Roy Ende, the Council Embassy of the State of Israel, Mr. Newton Kanhema, the Deputy Director, UN Information Center, the invited guests, the management of Daystar University, the faculty of Daystar University, my students from the International Relations Department, and other staff. This is a solemn occasion, and I think the depiction of Call tells it all. It's a very painful and It's a moment of prayer for the departed souls. But more importantly, it is a stark reminder of what happens when we don't value humanity. And that's why even in the Republic of Kenya, as I listen to the political shenanigans that we are exposed to every evening on our televisions, the raw ethnicity and just the loaded hatred for somebody because of their political linings sends to me very worrying signals. And so, Your Excellency, the Ambassador, we at Daystar stand with humanity. We stand with humanity, and we share the burden that COL is experiencing. I didn't want to say this, but in my upbringing, I was brought up by a Jewish family. And having been picked from the slums of Kibera, I moved to Livingston Drive, Madenge, General Madenge Drive in Westlands. And so the whole story of Auschwitz was spoken to me at every such a day. And I watched many movies, Escape from Sobibor and the others. And so I have not just an inkling of what the Holocaust was all about, but it is firmly ingrained in my mind. And that's why at Daystar I have told you, and I continue to say, so long as I am the one God has asked to keep watch of this university, there will be no ethnicity. And anybody playing the ethnic card is practicing what led to these atrocities that led to the creation of death camps and led to 6 million people being killed just because of their bloodline. And so, let us learn from this that anger puts in your system a very high proportion of poison, and it can do anything. Your Excellency, the Ambassador, my early upbringing from the Jewish people taught me 4 things. 1, they built my self-esteem at a very early age, because every Jew must fight for their existence. 2, they embedded in me the ability to defer gratification. Yes. That you can defer gratification for the bigger good of society. They created in me what I would call the education expectation. Because for every Jew, the most important thing in life is knowledge and skills, because it is portable. You can carry it. When you are evicted, when you are discriminated, you can move to America and create a life there with your skills and your knowledge. And we have seen it even in Kenya, where you are displaced from a place because of your ethnicity, but you just carry your skills and knowledge to another place and you start giving service. And above all, they ingrained in me the virtue of continuous skill development. So you never stop. I want us to learn from this memorial that we are all human beings, and that if I had not met this couple, I would never have become a vice chancellor. I would have been somebody who would have been born in the gutters of Kibera, grew up in the gutters of Kibera, and buried in the gutters of Kibera. And so with those very, very many comments, I share the burden of guilt if you are a human being on an occasion like this. It's now my pleasure to invite our PSS representative to come and give the message. David, welcome. Let's clap for him. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the State of Israel in Kenya, Oded Joseph, Representative of the Germany Embassy in Kenya, Jonas Kohl, Representative of the United Nations, Newton Hema, the Vice Chancellor of Daystar University, Professor Ayero, other invited guests, members of staff of Daystar University, students at large, good morning. My name is David Watene from the Ministry of Education, Directorate of University Education. I'm a Deputy Director. Before I give our PS's remarks, it is regrettable, Your Excellency, that he had another appointment. He realized that he was running late, and because of the importance of this day, he requested me to come and represent him. Allow me, therefore, to give the remarks of our PS, Ambassador Simon Nabukwesi, who is the PS, University Education and Research in the Ministry of Education. Remarks by Ambassador Simon Nabukwesi, Principal Secretary, State Department for University Education and Research, during the 2021 Holocaust Commemoration held on this day, 20th January 2021 at Daystar University. We are looking at the relevance of the theme of this Holocaust commemoration. The theme, Guiding Holocaust Remembrance and Education in 2021, Facing the Aftermath, Recovery and Reconstitution After the Holocaust, focuses on the measures taken in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust to begin the process of recovery and reconstitution of individuals, community, and systems of justice. Against a global context of rising anti-Semitism and increasing levels of disinformation and hate speech, Holocaust education and remembrance is important as it promotes the development of an historical literacy to counter repeated attempts to deny and distort the history of the Holocaust. It is observed by the United Nations in January each year in accordance with a mandate given by the United Nations General Assembly in its resolutions number 60/7 of 1st November 2005. When the United Nations General Assembly adopted this resolution, it reaffirmed that the Holocaust, which resulted in the murder of 6 million Jews, along with the countless members of other minorities, will forever be a warning to all people of the dangers of hatred, bigotry, racism, and prejudice. Another relevance of Holocaust in the international world. The Holocaust profoundly affected countries in which Nazi crimes were perpetrated, but also had universal implications and consequences in many other parts of the world. Member states of the United Nations shared a collective responsibility for addressing the residual trauma, maintaining effective remembrance policies, and promoting education about the Holocaust. This responsibility entails education about the consequences, causes, and dynamics of such crimes so as to strengthen the resilience of young people against ideologies of hatred. As genocide and atrocity crimes keep occurring across several regions, and as we are witnessing a global rise of anti-Semitism and hateful discourses, commemorating the Holocaust has never been so important. What has Kenya and Africa at large, or even the world, experienced that can be likened to the Holocaust? We have our own examples in Kenya, the 2007 post-election violence, tribalism and ethnicity leading to murders in our communities, the Rwanda genocide, and many others. Sometimes we hear them even from our small communities, and this is saddening. The relevance of learning about the Holocaust to students in our education system. The theme reflects the continued importance of collective action against anti-Semitism and other forms of bias to ensure the respect for the dignity and human rights of all people everywhere. It is everyone's shared responsibility to highlight the universal dimension of the Holocaust and encourage education on this tragedy, so that future generations will firmly reject all forms of racism, violence, and anti-Semitism. The Holocaust was a defining point in history, and its lessons have much to teach about the danger of extremism and the prevention of genocide today. What responsibilities do governments and citizens have in order to ensure occurrences such as the Holocaust do not happen again? One, for example, education programs which spread ideas of good neighborliness, peace, and unity as important fabrics in our societies. Thank you. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Thank you very much, David. And ladies and gentlemen, it's now my singular pleasure to welcome His Excellency the Ambassador, Joseph Oded, to address this gathering. Welcome, Ambassador.
Shalom. Shalom to you all. Mr. Vice Chancellor, Mr. Ayuri, my good colleague and friend from the German Embassy, Mr. Kohl, Mr. Watene, representative of the Ministry of Education, Mr. Kanhema, who is representing the UN, the top management of Daystar University, and maybe most important, you, the students of this very important university. Again, shalom to you all. I wish to thank you very much for hosting us today and holding this very special event for the remembrance of the Holocaust Day. This is a meaningful day, and I believe a very moving and touching day, not only for Israelis or for people, our friends from Germany. I believe this is a very significant and a very important day for the whole universe. This is a universal day. This is a global, important day. And there is a good reason why the UN General Assembly adopted in 2005 this special resolution of holding the Holocaust Remembrance Day on a very symbolic day, on 27th of January, which is also the day of liberation of the Auschwitz death camp. The international community, also in other forums, has mentioned the importance of the remembrance of the Holocaust Day. There's also the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, that based on what is known as the Stockholm Stockholm Declaration, excuse me. This was yet another important opportunity where the international community has joined together to make sure that this day is being remembered. One of the things I would like to say to you today is that I believe that the Jewish Holocaust is a unique case of a genocide. It's definitely not the only case of genocide. Unfortunately, crimes against humanity took place in the past. They continue also to take place in the present. Alongside the genocide against the Jews that began in the 1940s, there was also a genocide against the Poles. We know the genocide against the Cambodian people in 1975. They've lost also 1.4 million. 800,000 of Circassian suffered from a genocide in 1864. Unfortunately, the historians still debate whether the Armenians suffered from genocide of about 700,000 people, almost a million people of Armenians that lost their lives. Africa, this continent, knows too many cases of genocide. More than 10 million people lost their lives in ethnic cleansing, ethnic wars, evil that came upon us on this continent. And still I claim that the Jewish Holocaust is different, is unique. And why am I saying so? This is probably the only case in history where the victim could do nothing in order to save his life. There is nothing that he could have done to repent the sin that he is a Jew. There was no way for him to surrender into the hands of the one who acted this crime against him. And why is that? Because the Jewish Holocaust was based on what is known as the Nazi race theory. This is a so-called scientific theory that is based on science, that is based on academicians, on researchers that have developed this very unique concept or very unique theory of race, whereby the Jews and others were the type of race that are contaminating the humanity, and therefore they have to be exterminated. Therefore, the world has to get rid of the Jews. And again, the tragedy is that Jews could do nothing against it. The race theory looked into the biographies of the Jews, who they've seen, of the search, who were their parents, who were their grandparents. And you could have been a converted Christian for years. You could have been born to parents that they've decided to convert to Christianity. But still, the very efficient machine of the Nazi ideology searched for your siblings, for your parents, for your grandparents, and had they found that you have, God forbid, Jewish blood in your body, then you're destined for one thing, and that is for death. And therefore, I'm saying that the unique case of the Jewish Holocaust is a unique case because, again, you could have done nothing against the destiny that the Nazi regime thought you should get to. I want to make another very important point. I'm not highlighting the uniqueness of the Jewish Holocaust to say, God forbid, that there is hierarchy in the types of genocides. There is no good genocide. They're all bad. They're all terrible. There is no justified ethnic cleansing. They are all horrific. There are no understandable wars against people just because of hatred, xenophobia, or other reasons. All of them are bad. All of them are terrible. All of them should be fought against. But I am making this point because I think it's important to understand how far hatred could go. How far to what point evil could reach. And as my good colleague and friend from the Embassy of Germany has said, the Jewish Holocaust did not begin with the final solution, did not begin with exterminating the Jews. There were early signs for this terrible event in history. And this is why I'm mentioning the uniqueness. I'm mentioning the uniqueness of the Jewish Holocaust to realize how far hatred could go and how important it is to stop it when you see early signs of that. People tend to ask what sort of lessons we could learn from the Jewish Holocaust and from other genocides, again, as I said earlier. And I think many lessons could be learned, and I don't want to elaborate. We could discuss it maybe in the open discussions. What is the private lesson in every one of you from this terrible event in history? But I do want to mention three. One is a lesson I think that us Israelis have learned. We have learned how important the modern Israel is, the modern independent Israel is. How important it is that Jews have only one place in the world that they could secure and that they could exercise their national identity, and that is in the state of Israel. We have learned how important it is to develop strong security forces to make sure that we are able to defend ourselves by ourselves. So that's a very important lesson that we have learned, one lesson that we have learned. Another important lesson is, I think this is more universal, and that is to never forget. Never forget and always to remember. And again, I want to point this or to highlight this lesson not in order for us to look back. It's not the analysis, the pure analysis for what has happened in the past. That's less important for me. It's not to continue blaming others. I think it's important to remember and not to forget in order to learn from these lessons, to look into the future, to make sure what is our responsibility of each and every one of us. What is it that we could do today from learning the past to make sure that we have a much more secured and present. Or as in one of the documents of IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance have said, a world that remembers is a world without genocide. Last but not least, the lesson that I think should be learned, and that relates to my earlier point, is that it's very important to stop things and to stop hatred when it's small. When you see the early signs, that exactly is when the chances that you could stop these very negative developments could happen. And probably this is the most important lesson that I think we should all learn from. Which brings me to the point of what is it that we could all do? Because there's still a lot that we could do. And I want to take this opportunity to call upon this very important university, which I read here, you make a difference. I think this is an opportunity to try and see what is it that Kenya could do, and the mainly education system in Kenya could do to join learning the lessons of the Holocaust, the lessons of different genocides, in order to have a much better future. And I want to call upon the government of Kenya to join the IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, working definition of anti-Semitism, because it has very practical aspects of it, of what could be done in the educational system here in Kenya, and how Kenya could join forces with other countries to fight against xenophobia, against hatred, against racism, against anti-Semitism. And a lot has to do, as I said earlier, in educational system, in academic institutions, where the research is taking place. I cannot find a better place than an academic institute where research is at the heart of what it does, asking those critical questions daily, seeing how those questions and practical, how these academic issues could be translated into practical actions. I cannot think of any other better place to start those initiatives but in universities, but through education, but through research. And I want to take again this opportunity to thank you all for hosting us and for holding this very important day, the remembrance of the Holocaust. This is not taken for granted for us. It's very much appreciated. And as I said earlier, I cannot think of a better place to start these initiatives but in such an important academic institute such as Daystar University. So thank you very much. Shalom to you all. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency of the State of Israel, for that message this afternoon, reminding us to be peacemakers wherever we are, to be able to deal, to become tolerant, and to look at each other as brothers and sisters, that I can see me in you. So thank you for that powerful speech this afternoon. We go into our second section, where we are going to have a short documentary that is going to show to us what the victims of the Holocaust went through. And we are asking the IT people, maybe they can prepare to screen this for us. And as we watch this, as the ambassador has commented in his remarks, let us, as more the students that have come to learn this afternoon and the whole Daystar community, as we watch this, we can prepare for the Q&A section, the questions that we may want to ask in relation to this memorial. Thank you.
They set up a very large network of labor camps in which there were Jews and non-Jews, but Jews were treated the worst with tremendous brutality, and therefore a great many Jews died in the framework of performing forced labor for the Nazis. Although the Nazis were willing to exploit some Jews for labor for a while, ultimately their goal was to murder all of them. The result was that some 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust.
When you teach about the final solution, you should of course deal with the historical context and the development of the final solution as an historical issue. However, we suggest not to alienate our students from the story, not to distance them from this historical event and even traumatize them with these facts and horrifying messages. We choose to focus on the human story. Using multidisciplinary sources, we try to understand how people maintain dignity, how they struggled for life, how they struggled for their identity in a world of dehumanization and of murder.
Giving the victims a name, a face, rather than focusing on numbers, evokes a sense of empathy. They become real people with emotions, with feelings, with aspirations. Ellis Lewin was 12 years old when he was deported from the Lodz ghetto to Auschwitz-Birkenau with his father, his mother, and his sister.
Auschwitz-Birkenau, located in Poland, was the largest extermination and concentration camp set up by the Nazis. Historians estimate that up to 1.3 million people were murdered in the camp, and the vast majority of them were Jews, perhaps up to 1.2 million. Almost all of the Jews sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau were murdered immediately upon arrival. A minority of them were taken into the camp to perform forced labor and become inmates.
When we arrived to Auschwitz, the minute they opened the wagons, it was just total, complete misery, beatings and screamings and beatings and barking of dogs and growling of dogs. And we were just holding on to each other, and I don't know, within minutes, my mother and my sister were dragged to one side, and I was dragged with my dad to go to another side. And my dad hollered to her, "You take care of her, I'll take care of him."
Ellis focuses on the pace and on the sounds. He talks about the shouting, the barking, the yelling. He talks about the pace. Everything happened fast. There was a rhythm to this whole chaotic process. The purpose behind this was to confuse them, to make them feel like they don't know what's going to happen next. This was the system. In Ellis's testimony, he describes the rupture, the dismantling, the tearing apart of everything. Families are being torn from one another. At the same time, we see this attempt of continuity, the attempt to cling on to family. So Ellis's father says to his mother, "You take care of her, I'll take care of him." This is an attempt to continue in a world that's constantly fracturing, rupturing, and falling apart. The tension and struggle between rupture and continuity is something we see reoccurring in so many stories of Jews in the Holocaust, in ghettos and in camps.
My dad threw me in front of him. The one thing you didn't want is for the Germans to see that you were holding on to your child, because that was the whole idea, is to break up the family, murder the family. That was the genocide of the whole thing. So by not identifying that this is your child, there was a little bit of an edge you had to possibly survive.
Ellis's testimony evokes empathy with no need for simulation or role-playing. Watching his testimony gives a feeling as if he's traveling back in time, as if he's almost reliving what happened there. It gives a sense of authenticity and enables us to touch upon times, to touch upon the events that happened decades ago. The Auschwitz album is the only photographical evidence left from the camp. Combining this with Ellis's testimony allows us a better understanding, a wider perspective of what happened in the camp. This photo reveals the chaos Ellis describes. Without his words, we would not
Thank you, our students, for that beautiful message that I am you, you are me, and if I hate you, I hate me. Resonating with the theme today in memorial of the victims of the Holocaust. Next, we go back to our previous item. They are ready for us, the documentary. So they are setting it up. So we are patient.
When World War II broke out
I was dragged with my dad to go to another site. And my dad hollered to her, "You take care of her, I'll take care of him."
Ellis focuses on the pace and on the sounds. He talks about the shouting, the barking, the yelling. He talks about the pace. Everything happened fast. There was a rhythm to this whole chaotic process. The purpose behind this was to confuse them, to make them feel like they don't know what's going to happen next. This was the system. In Ellis's testimony, he describes the rupture, the dismantling, the tearing apart of everything. Families are being torn from one another. At the same time, we see this attempt of continuity, the attempt to cling on to family. So Ellis's father says to his mother, "You take care of her, I'll take care of him." This is an attempt to continue in a world that's constantly fracturing, rupturing, and falling apart. The tension and struggle between rupture and continuity is something we see reoccurring in so many stories of Jews in the Holocaust, in ghettos and in camps.
My dad threw me in front of him. The one thing you didn't want is for the Germans to see that you were holding on to your child, because that was the whole idea, is to break up the family, murder the family. That was the genocide of the whole thing. So by not identifying that this is your child, there was a little bit of an edge you had to possibly survive.
Ellis's testimony evokes empathy with no need for simulation or role-playing. Watching his testimony gives a feeling as if he's traveling back in time, as if he's almost reliving what happened there. It gives a sense of authenticity and enables us to touch upon times, to touch upon the events that happened decades ago. The Auschwitz album is the only photographical evidence left from the camp. Combining this with Ellis's testimony allows us a better understanding, a wider perspective of what happened in the camp. This photo reveals the chaos Ellis describes. Without his words, we would not understand the significance of the group of people walking along the fence. We would not understand that these are people walking on their last journey towards the gas chambers. In this photo, focusing on the last journey, we don't see faces. Nevertheless, it reveals the human story. These are the people the Germans saw as their enemies.
It's important to emphasize that we bring in the voices of the survivors because we tell the story of the Holocaust through the human lens, in a human perspective. But we should always remember that the majority of Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. Their voices will remain forever silent. Avraham Bomba, who survived the Treblinka death camp, emphasizes the point that the majority of Jews were murdered during the Holocaust, saying, that day they took out from 18,000 people, 5 people. Alice brings into the discussion the human perspective, the individual experience of the Holocaust. Avraham Bomba offers us a greater picture, the totality of the final solution. Elie Wiesel, a Nobel Prize winner and a famous author who wrote many books about the Holocaust, wrote a famous book called Night in 1954. Elie was 15 years old when he arrived to Auschwitz with his father and his mother and his sister. In his book, he describes how his childhood was completely shattered in moments and how he became an inmate struggling for life. Many moments he describes are defining moments that completely changed his life, such as the separation from his mother and his sister.
An SS came toward us wielding a club. He commanded, men to the left, women to the right. 8 words spoken quietly, indifferently, and without emotion. 8 simple, short words. Yet that was the moment when I left my mother.
Another defining moment is when someone started reciting the Kaddish. In Jewish tradition, when a person dies, a member of the family says Kaddish, which is the prayer for the dead, after them. If someone in the community does not have any children, someone takes it upon himself as a responsibility to say Kaddish for them.
I don't know whether during the history of the Jewish people, men have ever before recited Kaddish for themselves. Yiskadal v'yiskadash meirabu. May his name be celebrated and sanctified, whispered my father.
At this defining moment, at arrival in Auschwitz, they understand there might be nobody to say Kaddish after them. This is the end of the Jewish nation.
There are many similarities between Ellis Lewin's and Elie Wiesel's stories. As an author, Elie describes the events, but adds the meaning behind the events. He raises significant questions of humanity, of the relationship between human beings and God, of the significance of family. In these photos, we can see the process of dehumanization described by the survivors. This is what the women looked like upon arrival to the camp. And this is what they look like a few hours later. You can barely recognize these are women.
The cold and the hunger tormented us more and more every day. We became moving corpses, exactly like those we met when we arrived. Every day there were piles of bodies by the barracks. From morning till night, the smoke didn't stop. Autumn arrived, and with it, the rains and the cold. We knew that we would not be able to withstand the snow that would come, and that we would die of the frost one by one, like flies.
Entering the camp completely changed people's life. Those who weren't sent to the gas chambers became inmates, nothing but a number, living in constant fear of selection. Many of them could not withstand the unbearable physical and emotional conditions. Many of them perished in the camp.
There was no place to escape the cold. We slept in our clothes and sometimes in our shoes. The worst moment, though, was waking. It demanded the same decision every morning. I had to choose whether to fight or give in.
So what made it possible for some to bear the horrifying emotional and physical conditions? What made it possible for them to live in the shadow of death? We choose to address this significant question through artifacts. These objects are the only remnants from a destroyed world. They take on a symbolic meaning beyond their functionality. The fact that we can see, feel, and touch these artifacts makes us feel as if we're touching history.
While imprisoned in Auschwitz, Yanka Brezhnitz traded a full day's ration of bread for this comb. She kept it throughout the war and ever since. Yanka could not shower. She didn't have any clean clothes, but she was clinging to this comb. Clinging to the comb meant she was still a woman. This photo was given to Pavel Fisk from his wife, Annie. The two were married 3 days before he was deported to Auschwitz. In some way, they believed that maybe this would help them find each other after the war. Pavel kept this photo with an inscription from his beloved wife throughout the whole war. First, he hid it in his own mouth, and then he hid it in a sock.
As part of the process of dehumanization, all personal belongings were taken away from the inmates. Most of them were left with nothing. Holding on to anything personal in the camp meant endangering life. Those who chose to hold on to a personal artifact did it because it meant that they were keeping their dignity, that they were maintaining their identity, that they were hanging on to who they were. Without a sense of meaning, it was very difficult to survive in a world of chaos.
In 1944, Tzvi Kopylevich was weak and starving, yet he purchased this prayer book from a Russian inmate trading it for his daily ration of bread. Zvi kept the book and his entire journey of suffering from one camp to another.
סידור זה נרכש על ידי באושוויץ תמורת חלק ממנת לחם היומית שלי. עם הסידור הזה עברתי כל מסע הייסורים ומחלות מוות וריכוז בגרמניה. את הסידור הזה הני תורם היום ליד ושם למזכרת לדורות הבאים.
And so we go through the museum, and what should we do? Weep? No. My good friends, we never try to tell the tale to make people weep. It's too easy. We didn't want pity. If we decided to tell the tale, it is because we wanted the world to be a better world. Just a better world, and learn and remember. What is our role? We must become the messengers.
Thank you for that solemn documentary that we have watched. And as it ends, we have been reminded what is our role. It is not pity, but it is to make the world a better place by being peacemakers. This is the message that we are carrying today. We move into the Q&A section, and I'm sure our students have many questions to ask with regard to today's memorial, and we are asking the mics to be provided so that we can be able to have the students ask the questions in the Q&A. We are going to take just a few questions for this. Kindly, Asunta, if you could help us to bring the chairs so that they can respond to the Q&A. Just bring them to the dais here. Yeah. As that is happening, the chairs are here. The chairs are here, so you can kindly help us to put them on the dais so that we can have the Q&A section. Thank you. So the mics, please. So we are going to take a few questions from the students. Yes, Desmond. Desmond, please. Any other student? Those that have questions? Yes, Mabira. Yes, you can come over. Kindly, just take your positions. Over here, please. Just here. Just here. Just over here. Any other questions from the students? We are going to take just 5 questions, 5 of them. These are 4 Can we have some gender representation? Thank you. Kindly, yes. Yes, please. So Desmond.
Good evening. Thank you for this chance. My question goes to Ambassador Odette Joseph. Looking at the current chaos in the Sahel, we also see chaos in Uganda. We've seen chaos in Ghana, and Ghana, Ambassador, Ghana is the blueprint to the African democracy. They are known to be peaceful, but currently there is chaos. Looking at chaos in Washington, whereby a teenager who was midwife to democracy for 300 years has been on run because of one individual who tweets and doesn't know the repercussions of these tweets to the higher multitude. Don't you think it's high time we begin to talk about one world government? Must we have 196 elections? Must we have 196 presidents? Must we have 196 passports? Must we have 196 trade policies? Ambassador Khalid, don't you think we have to begin talking about one world government, whereby we come together as a nation, as institutions, and we reduce redundancies of hate, redundancies of enmity, and increase efficiencies? Thank you.
So we will take the questions, all the questions, and then we will have the responses.
Thank you so much. My name is Meshak Mabira Metas, and I have a question. First of all, I want to address my question to the ambassador of Israel and the representative of Germany, Mr. Ko, who's my friend for about 1 year, but I'm shocked to see him here, and he has never told me who he is. Ko is good in Swahili, perhaps, than all of us here. Let me give you an information. The question I'm having is, I wanted to ask both the ambassador of Israel and the German, what is the plan for the both countries so that we can learn as the world and as Africa? Because I think since 1944 to 1945, what happened for Jewish people, it didn't stop there. It's still happening in the world. Let me say about from 1998 till now, a country like DRC, they have lost for about 5.4 million people. And if peace was to be there, I think we couldn't be seeing all this around the world. Because as they said that we have to learn from what happened before. But I can say we are not learning anything. Because what happened in Rwanda was same. What we are seeing in countries like the DRC, where about from 98 to 2008, we lost about 5.4 million. What I just want to understand is what can we do as a world to stop these killings and the story of Holocaust, because it's still going there. I just want to know what we can learn from there and what's the plan the both countries have planned so that the world can learn from there. Thank you.
All protocols observed. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Klein. I'm a first-year student. My question goes to the representative to Germany, political counselor. I was asking, from the video I watched on the Holocaust, we could see the killings of persons, women, children, men. People were taken, the Jews were taken as slaves for hard labor. So I wanted to ask if because earlier on you said it should start from the institutions. We inculcate good teaching so that we know how to develop the art of peacemaking. But my question goes to the representative of Germany, to most especially to the political class, because for us we might be having the art of peacemaking. What of the political class? What of the politicians? What of the presidents, the heads of states, those who work in the diplomatic corps and etc.? Because I say this because we know across the world there are some leaders whose behavior reflects down to the countries they represent. Take an example of North Korea. We know what happens there. We know how the president of North Korea behaves. People there live in fear. So, same to China. We know the tension that is there between China and Hong Kong. So, what strategies have been put in place to instill that good behavior to such leaders? Because it's now a matter of the political class, because for us we might be having the art of peacemaking, but what of those political leaders who don't seem to be having that empathy? Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Walter Nalwa. I have two questions. The first question is, did the post-war trials shape the international justice on crimes against humanity? And then the second one is, what are the cultural impacts of the Holocaust on Jewish today, more so politically? Lastly, the question is, has there been any form of reconciliation between Germany and Israel? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Antonia Waskowiak. I'm originally from Germany, and I'm also a student here. I'm studying community development. And my question today is, how can we as students, and also Israel, Germany, and Kenya develop this country to a more peaceful country, and how can we solve peaceful conflicts, and especially on how can we work closely with the Israel and the German embassy with the Daystar University. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Now it is time for responses, the answers towards those questions. Without necessarily any order, maybe we could begin with those that were addressed to His Excellency the Ambassador, then we come to the German representative.
Well, thank you. My age, it's the big challenge is to remember all the questions. So if I remember to answer the right question, let me know. But let me begin with the first question I think was asked: isn't it time for us to have one whole world with one leadership and one society, one rule, one whatever? Of course, it reminds me when I was a teenager, and I used to listen to John Lennon. So I'm sure you all know the song Imagine. Imagine all the world will be as one. Well, it's a very nice notion, but I want to say two things about this. It's a nice concept, but is it really realistic, and should it be realistic? I think what is more important are the two following statements. The first is that the values that we have to all share is the fact that we actually recognize the differences between us. That we understand that we are different, but we still respect each other, even though we're different. We don't have to be as one. We have just to be tolerant to each other and to respect the different backgrounds, the different cultures, the different religions that we all come from. And I think that's much more powerful for me than aiming to be something that I don't think we could ever be. This is, I'm afraid I don't think this is a very realistic notion. And I think we do not need to give in or to forget where we came from, our history, our culture, our religion. On the contrary, we have to stick to them. But as I said, in a manner that still respects others. In the Jewish religion, there is a saying which I think encapsulates what I've just said now. There is a saying, and I would say it first in Hebrew, and then I'll try to translate it as much as I can. Ve'ahavta lereacha kamocha. Love the other as much as you love yourself or your very close one. And when you reach the point that you understand that you should respect when you treat others, I think for me this is one short sentence that encapsulates exactly what I was trying to say earlier. So stay different, but still respect each other. So that's about, I think this was one of the first questions that were asked. Second question related to the relations between Israel and Germany. We are lucky to have Germany as a very strong and bold friend of Israel. The relations between the modern state of Israel and the Germany of today is far different from, there's nothing to compare. No one makes any comparison. Not to a better type of cooperation, and a strong friendship between our nations. And the cooperation that Israel and Germany enjoys today are in every sphere that you can think of. So that's on the relations of Germany and Israel, and I'm sure my good colleague and friend from the German embassy, Mr. Kohl, could compliment himself on what he thinks about our relations. Last but not least, I think this is a question that repeated itself in a slightly different version. So again, and please remind me if I've forgotten any of the questions, to answer any of the questions. I think one of the questions that repeated itself in one way or another is, what is it that we could do today? And how is it that we could address the continuous atrocities that are taking place in the world? Yes, apparently it will be very difficult for humanity and for people everywhere in the world to be totally immune from hatred, to be totally immune from racist beliefs and thoughts. We are human beings, and unfortunately, we are not totally and 100% immune from that. And as we said earlier, I think one of the main lessons we should all learn from the different types of genocide, from the Jewish Holocaust and others, is the main lesson is, for me, is that unfortunately what happened in the Holocaust could happen again. And with this recognition, I think this is probably one of the most important things that we have to take, and most important lesson that we have to take from our history. And once we understand and recognize that it could repeat itself, then we have to think what we could do in order for making sure it doesn't. So we remember not in order to weep, as said by one of the most prominent Jewish people that survives the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel. It's not remembering in order to weep. It's remembering in order to make sure that we have a much better world. And it starts from what each and every one of you could do. And I think it's education. I want to encourage you as students here in Daystar University, who again, I learned today, makes the difference. You make the difference. I want to encourage you to go online, visit the site of Yad Vashem, who is the main museum of the remembrance of the Holocaust in Jerusalem. Search, research, look at the witnesses that the survivors have given, those short clips and videos that tell their story. Try to search for those grants for making a more deep and thorough research on this period of history and as I said, other atrocities that took in other places of the world. Again, in order to learn those lessons and to see what is it we could do in order to try and identify in early stages, the early signs of very negative developments that might lead, God forbid, to another atrocity, another ethnic cleansing, another genocide. So it begins with what you could do personally. I think there's a lot that could be done at the level of, as a university. I think what you're doing today is very important. And I think if part of the research, if you would encourage, if the university would encourage its students just to research these type of incidents in history, that's another way of making sure that we are much more aware of where we could, God forbid, where we could lead ourselves if we are not preventing these early signals on time. And last but not least is, of course, at the level of governments. And as I said earlier, yes, governments should join efforts together to sign on agreements, to sign on declarations, to take action, to take practical measures in their internal laws, in what they can do together in the international arena, to make sure that we are doing everything that we can in order to prevent, God forbid, the next genocide. So I think these are the main things we could do. And as I said, it really begins from the awareness, and it really begins from what each and every one of you could do personally before it reaches to the academic institutions and other educational institutions, or to other government, ministries, and then other governments, of what we could do at the UN. It really begins from your personal awareness, and I'm honored to say that what you are doing here today, as I said in my earlier remarks, is not taken for granted by myself. I think it's a very important way, and again, I want to thank you all, and God bless you. And if I have forgotten to answer any of the questions, then please remind me. If not, I'll ask my good colleague, Mr. Cole. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. I don't think there's much to add to what you said about the friendship between Germany and Israel, but I think maybe, coming back to this, what you also said at the end, the strong message of it starts with every one of us. I think reconciliation after the war between Germany and Israel started with many, many individuals who recognized the need for this. And actually, it's also true with another country that my wife is from. So with France. France and Germany were also so-called hereditary enemies. That's how France was described in German literature, in German media for a very long time. And it took several wars for us to also find some, let's say, better way of living together, of coexistence. And, this took generations, this took hard work, but this took also many, many exchanges that start with youth young people, exchanging young people meeting. And it's also, I think, one of the things that also happened after the war between Germany and Israel, young people exchanging, young people coming together and discovering that, we have so many things in common. We like the same music and so on. We read the same books, we have same interests, similar interests, so to discover this humanity and, let's say, the common things, the things that link us, and not the things that we might think or might have the feeling that possibly separate us. But yes, and I think I'll try and also subsume a couple of the other questions. Again, what can we do today? I think if we look at how crimes against humanity, but also the international system works, I think it's important to understand the role of the rule of law. Not just in each and every country, democratic country, the rule of law is the cornerstone, actually, of any sort of democracy. It's also maybe one of the lessons that, if you look into the German constitution, which was written in 1949, so the modern German constitution, it starts with the rule of law. So we also call it basic law. So I think this was one of the lessons or actually the writers of the constitution took from this period of war and this, ignoring the individual, the basic humanity of each and every one in the world. And I think if you look at nowadays, I think, when was it, 1999, 2000, the International Criminal Court was established to try and, of course, do justice or seek justice with, in cases of grave crimes against humanity. But this court also, ideally, if we respect it, if we know more about it, it's also a question of education, I think. If we respect this, and if this is respected, it can have the function to also reinforce the rule of law in individual countries. Yeah, and let me end by, saying that, because I think the first question you mentioned that why should we have 196 elections? Why should we have 196 leaders elected? I only wish that we would have 196 leaders elected. Unfortunately, this is not so. I think democracies, unfortunately, who elect their leaders, who have these peaceful transitions, are not in the majority. And I think this is something that we can work together. And it starts with the rule of law, which the respect for the rule of law starts with each and every one of us. It starts around our dinner table. It starts with what we do on Facebook, WhatsApp, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you for the Q&A section. I hope your questions have been answered. Are they answered? Okay. So that brings us almost to the end of our program this afternoon. We want to take this opportunity to thank you most sincerely for coming to Daystar. You're most welcome. The ambassador, we want to assure you that just like you have challenged us on the way forward to do a lot of research, more so in this area, we have our students, we have a course on genocide that we teach. And next week we even have some of the defenses that are happening. And there is a student writing on the case of the DRC. Like Mabira said, he's a student from the DRC, by the way. Yes, so it's very interesting case studies, and I can assure you are in that line, and we will pursue further, just like you have challenged us to visit Israel, to see the real places where the survivors were laid. We will. That is a promise that we make. At this point, I want to welcome the principal Nairobi campus to give a vote of thanks as we end our program. Thank you, and most welcome again to Daystar.
Thank you, Sylvia. Just two things. I know it's lunchtime and we need to leave. For Daystar, this is historical to be able to host this memorial remembering 6 million people that were killed, not for a mistake of their own. And so we'd like to appreciate for helping us make history, even in this institution. So we truly appreciate that. I think something else that I've seen, actually when I heard that Germany and Israel were coming, I was wondering, will there be a fight? But it's very interesting. They're very cordial, and I'm sure this comes from the governments. And so we'd like to appreciate, and these are lessons for us as well. So sometimes we have very small matters, even in our own schools, in our own departments, in our own homes. And we seem to refuse to forgive one another. So this is a great lesson that we have learned, and we'd like to appreciate that aspect. So I think just to thank Ambassador and our friend from Germany, as we begin by thanking God, and let me be more specific now, the God of Israel. That's how we call our God. And I guess maybe also Germany also say God of Israel. And this is very significant. Our roots as Christians come from Israel. They come from Abraham. Actually, God told Abraham, I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. Now, today we are blessed because we have hosted these two friends that have become friends. So we want to thank God for this opportunity to be able to host. Of course, specifically thank the Israeli ambassador, Joseph. We truly appreciate, sir, your excellency, even for finding time to be here. We appreciate that. And the lessons today, I'm sure the Dean and the HOD, Sylvia, this is more than a class. Our students, is it not? This is like several classes. We have learned a lot, and we'd like to appreciate even that opportunity to be able to learn. The videos, the exhibition, and the lecture, would like to appreciate this. So, and then our friend from the ministry, Mr. Watena, please pass our regards to Ambassador Nabukwesi. Please let him know that we appreciated your presence. Our consul from Germany, Cole, we want to appreciate even that kind of emotion that we saw. You know, emotions are authentic. And so we'd like to appreciate for that and for coming, and even the things that you've told us, we truly appreciate. Our VC has had to leave. We would like to appreciate him in absentia for the great leadership that he's giving us. Our DVC academics, our DVC FAP has left. We'd also like to appreciate the leadership that we receive, the director, resource mobilization. Thank you, Prof. And at the level of the deans and the managers, specifically the dean, Dr. Musembe, we appreciate. Even this is really, you are the engine of this, and together with your HOD, we would like to appreciate the work that you have done. And of course, all the other deans, all the other HODs, the managers, and specifically corporate affairs, they did quite some great work. We would like to appreciate Damaris for this. And staff in my office, Boas and the rest that also work towards this. Our faculty, our students, we appreciate you. We appreciate that even your representative and even the questions that we've had, very intelligent questions. We thank God that you are our students, and we appreciate. I'd like to appreciate then everybody else that I've not mentioned. I know there's an entourage from the embassy. We appreciate all of us, and so we want to thank you. And so as I conclude, our guests, please, you're welcome. Let's see this as having been just a first. we can do more collaboration and do more work together. You know, the ministry, Israeli embassy, German. We can move this nation a little bit further if we can collaborate. And we can promise you, we don't have a lot of bureaucracy in Daystar. So things are efficient. So we'd like to say that you're welcome so that we can collaborate more. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. Thank you for being here. Sylvia, I return the program to you.
Yes. Thank you. As we draw to the end of our program this afternoon, we want to end with prayer, and we are requesting Professor Boyo to kindly come and lead us in prayer, and to thank our guests for coming, and we welcome you to come again and again. Thank you so much. And the band, as we have the closing prayer, you will also give us the exit song as our guests exit. As we exit, you kindly remain seated as our guests leave, and after they have left, we will exit from the back door kindly. Thank you so much, and welcome, Professor Boyo.
Okay, thank you very much, and to echo the words of everyone, we appreciate Your Excellency. Thank you for being with us. Shall we all rise for our closing prayer? Let's pray together. Our Lord and our God, we are grateful. Indeed, we have had a very solemn moment of remembrance. It's a moment that reminds us that we are all your creation, and we are all, as human beings, one, created in your image. And indeed, as we go through difficult situations and circumstances, as we have remembered the Holocaust and all those who lost their lives in that very traumatic situation, may we be reminded that, Lord, you are the Prince of Peace, and you have called upon all of us to live in peace and to know that we belong to you and to one another. And Lord, help us to be able to look for opportunities and moments where we can be able to inculcate through the various opportunities that you give us the need to live together in peace and to always remember that we belong to one another. We thank you for this moment, and we pray that you continue to give us more opportunities where we can share and where we can be able to indeed do those things that you have created us to do. We thank you for our visitors, and as they leave, we pray that you continue to be with them and guide them. And Lord, help us even to have other situations and circumstances where we can meet and work together toward furthering the well-being of humanity, not just here in this country, not in this institution, but in our respective countries and in the globe at large. We thank you and we praise you for this, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. And I think we have come to the end of our meeting. Thank you.
So kindly, you may give our guests time to exit. And as we are reminded, let us go in peace and to be peacemakers. That is the lesson that we carry with us this afternoon. So thank you so much for coming, our dear students. And don't go home hungry. We have prepared for you something to bite out here. So you can do that in a moment as they set up. And continue taking your classes and be encouraged as we become peacemakers and go forth. Thank you so much.
I will trust in you and know